sounds dramatic to say grieving, but like I was a fucking mess. I was like, I've lost this thing. That's my whole fucking life. That's my entire identity is wrapped up in being in this band. And like, if these guys can't stand to be in the same room as me, what the fuck am I going to do with myself? It was awful. It was so awful.
This is Kingston Live. When we started this podcast in 2018, we entered into a musical landscape that looked different from the one we see today. Some artists and bands have moved away, some have broken up and formed new projects, and new ones pop up, continuing the growth and evolution of the scene. However, even what seems familiar can look a lot different under closer inspection. Our very first guest on the podcast was local rock band The Wilderness, fresh off the release of their EP Seminary Road. At the time, they were already a staple of the local bar scene, and over the following years, they would make multiple appearances on the podcast. In 2020, they released their debut full-length record, Until Tomorrow, an ambitious album that tackled themes ranging from climate change and social inequality to antidepressants and heartbreak. It's an album with a lot to say, released right as the pandemic made everything else a little quieter. Over the following 3 years, they played some big shows and released a live album. But updates on a new record were few and far between, at least until 2023. Rumblings of a new record started to circulate, but it quickly became clear that it wasn't going to be a repeat of Until Tomorrow.
And I walked past the oak tree, and we spread our dog's ashes in the breeze.
The new record, Strangers I Used to Love, finds The Wilderness reinvigorated, re-energized by the paradigm shift of the pandemic and the impact it had on everything from their personal lives and their approach to songwriting itself. Today we sit down with the band to discuss the record, the experiences that inspired the songs, their next moves, and their perspectives on the changing face of the Kingston music scene. Hello, this is Kingston Live. I am Johnny San.
I'm Riley DeBoer.
And we have with us from The Wilderness, Jonas Lewis Anthony.
Hello.
And Nicholas Lennox.
Howdy. Thanks for having us.
Well, welcome back.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I'm trying to remember the last time. Like, I remember the last time. What was it, like 3 years ago now?
It was summer 2020.
Yeah, we sat in Skeleton Park because COVID was still rife on big old lawn chairs and talked about our last album.
That was a good time.
That was a great time.
It was a really good time.
I like the outdoor podcast. We can't do it right now because it's winter. It's very cold, but yeah, it's a good time.
It's barely winter. It's like climate change. It's the last winter, guys.
Yeah. Enjoy it while you can, because next winter will be fire.
Yeah.
We've got a new album.
Yes, we do.
Strangers I Used to Love. Yeah, let's talk about the first single, the title track.
So, I'm from the UK. I'm sure I've mentioned that before.
Once or twice.
Not that I've made it my entire identity or personality or whatever. But yeah, so during COVID, I didn't go home for 2.5, maybe more years. And I got to go home for the first time in July of 2022. And I took my girlfriend with me, and it was my sister's wedding and my mum's 60th birthday party. And I was so just sick to my stomach homesick during COVID. Like, I'd never experienced homesickness like that before. I think it was probably because the option to go home was always there. And then when it was taken away during COVID, it was just like, ugh, I can't really describe how homesick I was. So leading up to this trip, I had this sort of like rose tinted colored glasses view and memory of the place that I grew up. And I was so excited to go home. Don't get me wrong, I had the best time. It was just so great to be home and so wonderful, but it was distinctly very different from how I remembered it because A, it had been 2.5, 3 years since I'd been home, and B, I won't say a grown up, but I've aged over that time. And there was the afternoon, it was my mum's 60th birthday party, and my girlfriend and I were at my mum's house, and she was doing an excellent job talking with friends and acquaintances of my mum's, most people who I didn't know. And I was like, hey, how you doing? You hanging in there? And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. But if I have to make small talk with strangers one more time, I'm going to lose my fucking mind. And I was like, okay, I'm writing that down. And then the idea basically, like, that kind of became like the thesis of the song, because I realized that while I was there, a lot of people who I was very close with, I wasn't as close with. And that's just part of growing up. That's just time passing by. And it was actually a really weird and kind of sad realization I came to, that like, this isn't my home anymore. And these people who used to be so important to me and still are, some of them have kind of become strangers, and like I'm struggling to figure out what we can talk about. And 10 years prior, we would be talking about things like no problem, you know? So that was kind of the long-winded version of how that song came to be.
Have any of these people heard the song?
Yes, they have.
And what was the reaction?
Pretty positive. Yeah. A lot of people think it's a banger. Yeah. The second verse, I had to do some explaining. But we figured that out. But I mean,
do you want to explain that here to save yourself some conversations later?
It's a really good line. It's just a line that probably gets people in trouble, namely Jonas.
Mostly me.
I think I know what we're talking about. Yeah. Do we want to go there?
Well, my dad's probably not going to listen to this anyway. So while we were writing the song, like, and we wrote it and rewrote it like 1,000 times. And on the last iteration of it being rewritten, I felt like that the verses just didn't tell like a good enough story. So it was one of the first songs that got written for the album in some regards, and one of the last. And we rewrote all the verses like a week before we went to the studio. And we were in Nick's living room, and I was trying to like sort of tell the story about like my girlfriend and I, Connie, we're back home. We ended up leaving Canterbury for a while, which is where I grew up, and we like to get away, and we went on this like nice drive to Wales, and you know, I was showing her all these places I grew up. And then part of the story of the song is you bump into somebody who you used to know, used to be really close with, and you start having a conversation. And it's strange because at one point in time you would have had like meaningful conversations with them, and at this point in time you're literally talking about like, oh, what's the weather like in Canada? So the second verse is, life has been good, nothing too crazy, my sister got married, she's having a baby, you know, like boring small talk. And I didn't know how to follow it up. And then I was like, oh, it's so good to see you, how have you been lately? And then Carl goes, my mom's doing well, but my dad fucking hates me. And I was like, oh man, I can't say that. But everyone was like, that's the line. And I was like, oh, fucking.
It's a pretty memorable line. Yeah.
It's going to get me in a bit of trouble. You know, those are the things that you would say with a close friend, not somebody who you are now an acquaintance with. And the idea of that verse is it was like a conversation between two people, and one of the people is oversharing a bit, and the other one is being reserved and just being like, yeah, you know, like life is fine, you know, that kind of thing. So I had some explaining to do around that line, but
we can. It's ambiguous, right? We can each defer responsibility to everybody else in the band for writing that song, so nobody comes after us.
Well, yeah, and I did even have a conversation with an old friend who I know had a very contentious relationship with his family, and he alluded to that.
So it's his fault.
Yeah, so Dan Love, or Dan Love's dad, if you're listening, go speak to your boy.
And I thought you'd ask me where we were going, but you slept in the back seat. I rolled down the windows and drove across the country. There's some places I want you to see. The house in the hills where I spend my summers, it's hotter than hell, and it keeps getting harder. There's a town in the valley with cobblestone streets. I'll skip rocks in the river while you lie next to me, and we bump into someone who reminds me of something that I can't explain, because now it means nothing. I'm making small talk with strangers who life has been good, nothing too crazy. My sister got married, she's having a baby. It's so good to see you. Have you been lately? My mom's doing well and my dad fucking hates me. We talk about someone, it reminds me of nothing. I try to remember, am I supposed to feel something? There's a voice in the air and I've heard it before. I spill my guts and now the anger's not the same anymore. I'm making small talk with strangers who I used to love about Canadian winters and how much it hurt to get those tattoos on my fingers and what it means. Do they see a stranger when they look at me? I'm counting on my blessings and cutting my losses. I'm letting go of anger and the time that it cost me. Fell in love with my regrets. I'm sick of the shame. I'm living, breathing, screaming. I've got blood in my veins. Do you need me here? Should I come home? Do you need me here? Should I come home? Do you need me
Having said all this, where is home for you now?
Home's here, 100%. Like I feel like a tourist when I go home now.
Because that's kind of the vibe of the song.
That's
but-
exactly it. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
whole thing. It's like, this is where I grew up. These are the people that were important to me. This is the place that I used to spend my summers as a kid. And I just don't fit here anymore. It's like a weird sort of nowhere space that I feel like I land in, that I'm not quite Canadian enough to be Canadian, and I'm definitely not English anymore. And being so like desperately homesick during COVID, and then to go home and to have this realization, like, okay, like this place is just not home anymore. It was kind of sad for me, you know. Like, I still love it. My family are there. Some of my really good friends are there. But like, here is home now. My whole life is here. My friends, my community, my girlfriend, my dogs. Like, my entire life is in Kingston.
Well, and I like to think that in a multicultural society, you talk about feeling Canadian. It should be said that you shouldn't have to feel like you should be something if you consider yourself Canadian. Then,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's less about like, you know, do I own a pair of skates and play like hockey and wear plaid, and it's more of like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people would probably feel the same way if they move from one place to another. Like, you leave some parts of you behind, and you like take new parts of the new place with you. And I mean, I think that's one of the great things about Canada, is how there's people from all over the world, and that very much seems like its identity. But you know, sometimes people think I'm Australian all the time because they're like, you're not from England. And I'm like, I promise you I am. I just don't have a Canadian accent, but I say, how's it going, bud, sometimes. So it can be quite confusing.
I mean, if I can relate to the thing you're saying, like, I didn't move to Kingston from England, so I definitely don't have the same experience than you, but I feel the same way about Guelph. I grew up in Guelph, Ontario, which is 3 hours down the 401. I like the way that you root your songs and your identity, and like you talk about what it means to be like an expat, but it's
immigrant.
Yeah.
Expat's just a
word,
word that like white people use when they don't want to be called an immigrant.
The gentrified immigration.
Yeah, it's a gentrified immigrant. Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me. No, regardless. All I mean to say is that, like, I like that you talk about your experience that way, but I relate to that even being from another town in Ontario. Like, it's still like that, leaving home. There's a universality to it, I think, that speaks to a lot of people. So credit to you and Carl.
Well, even if you want to look at the music community, there's a lot of people who've come here, like you said, just from out of town, but they're here and they're in the community, and some people become part of the community very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, I think a big part of that is like, you have roots, and you pull them up, and that takes a considerable amount of effort. And when you put them back down again, having already been through like the whole like movement thing, it's like, geez, I don't have the energy to like dig up all those roots and go somewhere else again. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's something interesting, especially in what you just said about moving from like Guelph to Kingston, where it's only 3 hours. I think even the small, like those micro differences in like England to Canada, where I think it was like an interview with Frank Turner I heard once, where somebody said in Canada, 100 years is a long time, but in England, 100 kilometers is a long distance.
That's
and it's
exactly
so flip-flop.
It's so true, yeah.
Yeah.
Frank Turner, also, side note, said, quote, he's obsessed with this song.
Oh,
Nice.
that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot about
Yeah.
that. Tell us about that.
Oh
'cause
my
that was on
God.
your
Where
Insta
did that come
recently.
from?
Frank Turner, musical hero of mine. I have loved Frank Turner for as long as I've been playing music. My brother-in-law sent him Strangers I Used to Love. Frank Turner had replied to him like on an email saying, wow, that's a super great song. And I was like, okay, I'm going to email him and say thank you. So I emailed him this long email being like, thank you so much. I'm so glad you liked the music. And I sent him Christina because he's from Winchester, which is where my friend Christina, who's the song Christina is about, that's where she's from. I sent him like the link to the whole album. I was like, give it a listen. And he replied saying a lovely email and was like, I'm actually kind of obsessed with that song. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God.
That's great to hear, and I love the album. There's
Thank
a
you.
great energy about it, and I found myself comparing it to the previous album, Until Tomorrow, which had, I'd say, some darker moments on it. This album, I got the feeling that the band felt re-energized somehow. Is that correct?
I would totally agree.
Yeah.
I think the 4 years that have passed since Until Tomorrow, since we put that one out, which is August 2020, have been the hardest 4 years of our, not just careers, but like I think our lives as a whole. We went through some really, really rough times as a band and as a group of friends. And we've put a lot of weight and a lot of stock into the making of this album. And I think the process of writing it and the process of making it not only saved the band, but definitely like saved our friendship for sure. And I'm glad that comes across.
It feels like writing this album helped us be like a capital B band. You know what I mean? Like we've always been a band, and I've always had this like joke with the guys that like our shtick as a band is that we're a band who's a band. You know, we're not like a Viking metal band or anything. Our shtick is like we play rock and roll and that's it. When we recorded Until Tomorrow, it was such a creative process because it was all happening in the moment. There were songs that we had like never played before that we were just hashing out at the bathhouse, making it happen as it came to us. Whereas with this record, we were like, what even is the wilderness at all? What do we sound like? What do we want to sound like? What are we supposed to sound like? And we put in a lot of effort with one another as songwriters, with one another as instrumentalists to be like, okay, like here's where we can fit all these sounds together. Like Max's guitar parts on this record, for example, like really, really shine for me because like his sound as a guitarist is so present across all of these tunes and they really elevate the tunes. We shared responsibility for writing some of the songs like Strangers I Used to Love. There's a tune on this record called Hold Back the Daybreak, which we like literally wrote in a room shouting like 2 words of a sentence at a time at each other, trying to figure it out. Different people have come into different roles. Carl is singing more. Liam is really zoned in on the keys thing. I'm playing more acoustic guitar than I ever thought I would in my life, and also playing saxophone. We all really helped one another carve a place for ourselves and each other on this record. So I think it is like so much different of an effort than Until Tomorrow, but it feels like where we want to be, if that makes sense.
I love that phrase, capital B band. That's a great way to put it. And you also mentioned like the creation process of Until Tomorrow versus this. You were in the bathhouse for Until Tomorrow, and this record, you did a lot of work in your jam house in on Howe Island, and now you've got your own recording space that you're setting up in kind of South Frontenac. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. About our place in South Frontenac?
Anything and everything,
Sure.
all of this,
I mean,
the whole story.
Yeah, I mean, like, Until Tomorrow, you know, we put out an EP prior to that. and a few singles, but Until Tomorrow was our first album. And maybe it was Dave Grohl who said that, like, writing your first album is easy because you've been doing it your entire life, and then this is your second one that's really hard. God damn, he was right. Like, Until Tomorrow, there was a lot of us just being, like, so stoked that we were recording at the bathhouse and throwing every idea we had at the wall and seeing what stuck. And some of those songs, the first time we played them as a band, while we recorded them, and we did 12 songs in 9 days. This album has taken us the better part of 3.5, 4 years because COVID, not much else to do other than write songs. The first song we wrote for this album was November 2020. 2021, we got together and we rehearsed a bunch and when we could, and then there were a few false starts, and there, you know, like, then it was like, okay, are we going to tour this album cycle? Because we feel like we should tour this album cycle, but we'd already kind of moved on for it, but we hadn't. It was this really weird, like, gray area of our lives where we didn't really know what we were supposed to be doing. We did a few more demos in 2022, and, like, 2022 was just, like, the worst year for us. It was so difficult. Like, I was just certain that we were just done, and I didn't know what I was going to do with myself if that was the case.
Why did you think that?
I feel like just life had become really, really stressful. COVID, that was challenging for everyone for many different reasons, and also occupied a lot of space in our lives. It was hard to sort of carve out the time for the band again. I was our own worst enemy. I would have fucking driven us off a cliff if I'd been allowed to be at the helm of everything. You know, like, it was just like, it was a lot. There was interpersonal stuff. I was, like, insufferable to work with. Like, I was just being, fuck this, it's the band versus everything, like, blah, 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 blah. Like, anyway, so that was, it was a difficult time, and we were really struggling personally with each other as a band. The analogy I said was, like, trying to keep this band together is like trying to, like, keep water in, like, your hand, like, cupped hands, you know. And it was just like I was, like, doing anything I could to not let it slip through my fingers, kind of thing. But anyway, we went on tour in 2022, in the summer. And it's really funny too, because look, from the outside looking in, like, 2022 looked like our best year yet, and in many ways it was, and in many ways it was the fucking worst time. And when we got back, we were like, okay, we need to, like, figure something out. And the process that we took to write Until Tomorrow, or some of the songs, like, we were just all in a house, in a room together. And I've always thought, like, we do our best work when we're together as friends. Our two biggest enemies are never having enough time and never having enough money. And the two are so interconnected. So scrolling Kijiji one day, and I see this listing for a place on Howe Island, and it's empty, a huge house. It was ridiculously cheap, and it was only available for 6 months. And I was like, there's got to be a catch. But I guess the catch was it was an unfurnished rental on an island for 6 months over the winter. Like, how many people are really going to go for that? And we put in an application, and they said, sure. And we told them, like, we want to record. The plan was to record the whole album there because, you know, now we will be able to, if we don't have the money, at least we'll have the time. So we moved in all of the equipment that we could. We begged and borrowed and stole some. We got, like, Nick and Liam were driving around town getting free furniture from, like, Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that.
We lifted couches down a lot of stairs. Yeah. You do a lot of things for love.
And then we just kind of dug ourselves in for, like, 6 months, and we wrote a ton of songs, and we demoed even more. And that process, I know it sounds dramatic, but I really think it, like, saved the band, but more importantly our friendship, because it was just a space where we could just be friends, and there was no, like, timeline of, like, it's go time, like, we've got to get this thing out by, you know, next week or whatever. It was like, there was none of that. It was just like, we're going to go at our own pace, which is a really tough lesson for me, because my impatience was certainly, like, a big issue within the band, because I am the most impatient person ever. So, you know, we, like, really took our time with it, and taking our time was the best thing we could have done. And it meant that, like, I didn't dread band shit anymore. It was like, I just wanted to be there all the time. And sometimes we'd get there on, like, a Tuesday night. We had, like, a little ritual. We'd get there on a Tuesday after work. We'd make dinner. We'd hang out. Maybe we'd play some music. Maybe we'd just hang out. And then we'd have a fire in the evening, have a couple of beers, and we'd all have a sleepover in the living room. There was like 5 bedrooms in the house.
Yeah, we never slept in the bedroom. Not once. Everybody crashed in the living room together.
And, like just like 6 dudes in the living room. We'd usually fall asleep to like Band of Brothers or Saving Private Ryan, which is in retrospect a bad thing to fall asleep to.
That was why you were so stressed out. I hate to break it to you.
It's like the sound of gunfire.
The war.
And then we'd wake up on Wednesday and we'd be like, okay, let's play some music. And we were just doing it for the sake of doing it again, which we hadn't done since like we first started. I've been telling like a really long story, but like
they're asking about the studio we're building.
Right. That's it. Okay. Anyway,
But finish.
So this process was just like, I mean, it was probably the best 6 months of my life. I loved every second of it. I loved the process. I learned so much. We were more collaborative than we'd ever been because we were all in the same space at the same time. Like Nick said, we were like all writing songs together. And then, you know, we always knew it was going to come to an end. And when we moved out of that place, like I was bereft. And so I was like, this was the best thing for us. I want to be able to do this more. And I also want to be able to share it. So a couple months later, we found another place on Kijiji. It's not quite as, it's certainly not a mansion like the How Island place was, and it's not even as cheap, for goodness sake. But it's just north of Kingston, and we decided that we wanted to carry on that like How Island dream and just make it accessible to other musicians in the scene. So we've built our own studio up there, and we're kind of like soft opening it right now. And again, we've done it with next to no money, and we got a loan from Home Depot. So we did it on minus money, and we don't know anything about construction either. We just learned as we went. But now we have a studio that I'm really proud of it, and we want to basically like extend our experience on How Island to like other bands in the scene, or musicians, or anyone who, whether you want to come out here and just bang some drums for a couple of hours, or you want to record an EP or an audiobook or whatever it is. Like we just wanted to kind of capture that magic from How Island and just sort of make that go forward.
I think one of the themes that kept coming up as you like told that story, and something that I've always felt like is an overarching, just a very prominent theme with The Wilderness, is friendship. As you guys are a band, but you also seem so forward as just a bunch of dudes that are friends. And I think that's like the true, like you really lived the true dream of any like group of dudes that are just tight, where you're like, we should have a clubhouse. And you really pulled it off.
We really did. That's so true.
Oh boy. But it is the thing. I mean, so I'll share this with you. Like I said, I moved here from Guelph. I saw The Wilderness play before I was in The Wilderness. I keep telling people this. There's a poster in my office that has you guys before I was in the band, and the band that I was playing with at the time called the Royal Drifters and Basic White. They were on that bill too.
Yeah, I remember that show well.
And I was like, yeah, so I've seen you guys play, and that's always been the vibe that I got. And like sort of the interesting thing for me joining the band a little later, which is still like 5 or 6 years ago now. Good Lord.
Dude, it was 7 years ago.
Don't tell me that. Oh boy. The interesting thing is that like that has been like the biggest challenge and the biggest asset to the band. People tell us this when we play shows. They're like, okay, we can tell that you're having a good time. And we're like, yeah, because this is the only thing that we want to do. Mm-hmm. If we were doing this with our nemesis, this would be miserable. And sometimes we've been our own nemesis, you know what I mean? Like you get bogged down in the business stuff. You get bogged down trying to book tours or make show graphics or budget for a rehearsal space or whatever. And like, balancing that with being friends is incredibly tough, right? Like that's part of why it was hard in 2022, was because we were all reckoning with the fact that like we're on the cusp of turning 30. Most of the band already is.
I've still got like 3 months, man.
You know, like,
and then it's game over.
We're all working people trying to pay our rent. We're all like, we've all got jobs and relationships and dogs, cats, whatever. No kids yet. All of that makes it so that you can just spend ages working and not relating or making music, which is the important part and is such a driving factor of the way that we relate, because being on stage together is such a moment of community for all of us. And writing these songs was that for us, right? Like having the vulnerability to bring your ideas forward, like trusting your friends to play your feelings for you, which is something that I had to work on desperately. Jonas can take accountability for being maybe very demanding of the band, I can take accountability for being the nitpickiest person alive. Yeah, the music making moment really is where the community feeling happens for us. And so I don't think that this band would be what it is if we didn't love each other. And I think that like learning to love each other more has made us a better band.
Mm-hmm. The thing is like you're balancing this like really delicate line of business and friendship, and the business doesn't pay you any money. So you can't even say, well, we're making the best business decision right now because it's going to benefit everyone financially. It's like sometimes we were like, I wanted to make what I thought was the best business decision that was actually terrible for us as individuals. Like, hey, yeah, like, I don't care if you're broke, we're fucking going on tour and suck it up, buttercup. You know, like, the world just doesn't work like that anymore. You know, like bands used to go on tour and would make money. Now bands go on tour and if they're lucky, they sell t-shirts. That's the sort of the way the music industry has gone. So like a tough lesson to learn was while trying to balance this act, like sometimes the best decision for the band wasn't the best business decision, but it was the best, like we had to choose the decision that was the best for the friendship. And we've definitely shifted towards that over the last year and a half or so, making like the friendship the most important thing. If that's all working, then everything else is going to fall into place. And again, like 2022 was like awful. Like I was like, sounds dramatic to say grieving, but like I was a fucking mess. I was like, I've lost this thing. That's my whole fucking life. That's my entire identity is wrapped up in being in this band. And like, if these guys can't stand to be in the same room as me, what the fuck am I going to do with myself? It was awful. It was so awful. I'm just really grateful that we got to work through that together. And it took a lot of us sitting in circles, sobbing.
Yep.
Multiple times.
Many times.
But man, like, fuck, how good does that feel that you can just sit in a circle with a bunch of dudes and cry until things just feel better? The friendship to me is like, it's more important than even the music. You put the friendship first, everything else will fall into place and everything else will be okay. The music might suck, but who cares? We're having a good time and we have a clubhouse.
We do have a clubhouse.
Well, let's go back to the music for a second. Sure. I want to talk about another track on the album, Hollywood Boulevard.
Yes.
Jonas, you're known for a good rant once in a while.
Yeah.
What's happening at the end of that track?
That's me ranting. Yeah, that is literally with a megaphone. That is a megaphone at the end of that track, and I am ranting. And that list was pared down. There were like 70 things that I was yelling profanities about that we had to.
You've got like 8 bars. You got like,
yeah. You're like, oh man, like you can't say everything that you hate about the world. Like fuck Canadian telecom companies. Oh, you know,
that one will go well on TikTok.
Hashtag Bell, let's talk.
Yeah. So yeah, saying fuck Bell or fuck Rogers, like most people, like in Canada would agree, but like that's just doesn't really have a good ring to it lyrically. But yeah, that song is a big old rant.
It's a good rant.
It feels good. It feels cathartic. It's also like our most bombastic sort of like over the top, silly rock song. But in many ways, the character in that story is just like, it's like me in many ways. It could be sort of anyone. That whole vision of like, I want to be the biggest rock star in the world. Like, I want to fucking have my name in lights, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of maybe just a critique of like, just how stupid this all is in general. Like, it's so absurd. And we idolize people who are just fallible human beings who make stupid mistakes, and we love to build them up, and then as soon as they make a mistake, like just rip them to shreds. And the whole thing of like the 27 Club too being like, there's like a romanticism around these people dying in these horrific ways. I was just getting so frustrated with just being like, I just want to play music to have fun. And yet like this industry and like the way the world works is just so toxic. And even like my sort of wanted involvement in that is like awful, you know?
Well, I think the band leaned into that for a while.
Yeah.
Like in the early-ish days of, at least when I had first joined the band, that was like kind of what we were trying to do. We were trying to be like big, bombastic rock and roll, and like sure, it's like that's fun and playing shows is great, and I love that we put on a show with a lot of production, but like the whole rock star ethos, the whole like boys club thing, the whole like
showbiz, baby.
I guess, yeah. Like, I mean, I think we leaned into it as a band, being like, oh yeah, we're going to be the next big thing, and that was just like the worst thing for all of us, because then when we weren't, we all had to like go through an existential crisis and do a lot of learning and learn to like be nice to each other. So in many ways, like most of the songs on Strangers I Used to Love are like some sort of letter to a part of one's past, and like I perceive Hollywood Boulevard, maybe this is just me, but I perceive Hollywood Boulevard to be like about the band we thought we were 4 years ago. And now we're a very different band than that. And I love that it's still ludicrous. I love that it's got like so many saxophones and so many harmonies. And like I love that it has all the candy on it because I love that kind of music.
It just has jazz hands for the whole song. You know what I mean?
but like, yeah, philosophically speaking, it's like that is what a band could be, but that won't be us.
Yeah.
Something I've wanted to ask you guys about. I think it was about a year ago, I saw your show at the Isabel.
Yeah.
Great show.
Thank
I really
you.
enjoyed that. I loved the string section. But something I've wanted to ask any performer who's been on that stage. As an audience member, I've seen many shows at the Isabel, and there's always a moment where the performer just feels really awkward by the silence.
Oh my God,
because it's
yeah.
such a quiet room.
Yeah.
And I think most performers are not used to that.
Yeah.
Please, yeah.
Well, I mean, like our sort of usual setting for us to play a show is in a loud, sweaty bar.
Yeah.
Where, and I mean, especially in the early days of our band, like when
The dive
we were,
bars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like we were playing like, you know, the Toucan, and we were playing like the Brooklyn every Friday, and it would be packed full of like sweaty, loud people, and sometimes you'd have to fight for their attention. This time we're in a silent room where people have paid to come and see us, and they are listening to everything in perfect acoustics. So like at a show, I have okay-ish stage banter, especially at a loud bar. And then here I was like, I remember like I watched the video back recently and I was like, oh man, like tough crowd. Like not that the crowd were being tough, they were being great, but I was just being like, oh, everyone here, oh, you guys are real pieces of shit, am I right? Like but it was, yeah.
For the record, it wasn't quite like that.
Yeah. Like, but I was trying to like do the tongue-in-cheek like stage stuff between songs, and like people were like listening, and that made me really, really anxious.
Honestly, it was such a trip. Like, I went to Queens for music, right? Like, I played classical concerts on that stage, and I had such a great time at the Isabel because I was like, I never got a recital or anything. I wasn't that good at classical sax. I was like, this is finally the recital that I get to do at the Classical Hall in Queens, and all of these years that I've spent rebelling against the classical bullshit of sitting there with your hands in your lap and only clapping at the end of the piece and being very stoic and all of this stuff. I'm like, finally, to hell with that. And then we got there, and playing a rock show on that stage was like such cognitive dissonance for that reason. And there were lots of like there were a few cool pluses, right? Like, because people are sitting there listening, like there's some moments in our songs that like I've just never heard before.
Yeah, same.
Like there's 4 beats of silence in Where I Roam after the stick part, and in every other situation it's just like, okay, we're all counting. In that room I heard the sticks go and just ring out in that room. Beautiful. In between the songs, I was like, yeah, shit, what do we do? So that show was a trip, but it was awesome.
That was one of the highlights of our career, playing that show. It was
a great show.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It was really, really nice. And I feel like we really leaned into it, like by like the second half of the show, like, because there was an intermission, which I don't usually like doing, but we came back for the second half, and I felt like by the time we got there, we were like, okay, we know where we're at right now. I will insult the audience less. Turn it around, be more self-deprecating. And when in doubt, Nick can tell a joke.
Nick, I think I recall you slightly berating him for calling the audience awful people.
Okay, so
We didn't take it personally.
no.
Also, for the record, like I am so grateful that anybody would even come to our shows, even to this day. You're not awful people. I am just awful stage banter.
It was all in
person.
jest.
I'm going to share 2 quotes with you that are not Jonas's quotes, that are my mantra when I'm on stage. The first, I think you shared with me. You were talking about probably Clarence Clemens, and Clarence saying like, I don't play saxophone. My job is that I'm a professional Bruce watcher or something like that. I do feel like that on stage as like a front person adjacent role. And the other quote that I will share, I think this was Kent McDonald, who said, "The Wilderness is a sick band because there are 2 front people." And I do, when we're on stage, I'm watching this guy like a hawk, and it's not because I'm trying to keep him from saying things. It is that sometimes he's got to fix a string or something, and like I'm like, okay, we can chit chat. Other times I'm like,
Where's he going with this?
yeah. Other times I do smile and nod a bit, but it's out of love.
He's like, oh shit, Jonas is getting his manifesto out. He's getting his manifesto out.
No, I trust you implicitly, and you know, he's done the same for me. There have been times where I've been trying to talk on stage. He's like, all right, we're gonna start the song now. Let's go. They balance each other out. It's fine.
Thank you for listening to Kingston Live. Be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. For more great Kingston music, check out the Kingston Live playlist on Spotify. For show listings, artist info, and all things Kingston music, check out kingstonlive.ca.
Are you guys familiar with the music strategy?
Yes, very much so.
Any thoughts on the music strategy at this point?
Boy, howdy, do I have so many. In fact,
This is the other manifesto.
yeah, this is actually, so I went to all of those meetings at the Broom Factory, and then somebody from a consulting firm reached out to me and asked me a few questions, and then there was like a roundtable discussion on Zoom that was supposed to be with me and a bunch of other musicians, and I was the only one who showed up, so I was actually kind of pissed for a second, but then I was like, actually, this is sweet. I have the floor. First of all, I think it's amazing. I think Kingston is too good of a music scene for it not to be like put on like the world stage. There are way too many people who work way too hard for not enough reward, be it like monetary or otherwise, for it to go unnoticed. There are lots of people who have their hearts in the right place, and there's like all of the opportunity to make it happen. My biggest sort of critique and feedback, if you make policy changes that just benefit the community at large, it also benefits the musicians. Pay as many consulting firms, as many hundreds of thousands of dollars, all you want, but like at a grassroots level, like that's how things do well and succeed, is by supporting it at the grassroots level. Austin, Texas is the perfect case study. In the 80s, all of these record labels and musicians were moving there from Nashville and LA and New York because it was more affordable. And a lot of these record labels were just uprooting. And then the city of Austin were like, hang on a second, something's really happening here. We should talk to the movers and shakers in the scene and see what's going on. And they were like, okay, we're just going to brand ourselves as the music capital of the world now. Okay, how can we keep you here? And then a bunch of people formed like the Austin City Music Coalition. I don't know if that's the actual term for it, but like a coalition of musicians aboard, and they went to the city and they said, here are the things that we want. And we want free healthcare if you work in the music industry in Texas, you know? So if you, not just are a musician, but if you're a performer or a booking agent, I don't know, if you work within the music industry in Austin, you get your healthcare paid for. In Texas, it's crazy. There are incentives to landlords who have vacant properties to fill them with bands for rehearsal spaces. You know, there are like sensible things like free parking, you know, like really small things like that, things that actually benefit the greater community at large, which then help the music scene. And I think a lot of those things could be implemented here in Kingston, like actually just going and supporting what's already happening. There's a lack of infrastructure, you know, since we lost Roswell Rehearsals, that was a huge blow. The new multi-million-dollar housing developments downtown have just evicted bands from the last rehearsal space in downtown Kingston, and yet we're spending a ton of money paying a consulting firm to come up with answers instead of listening to the musicians themselves. And I know the musicians in town and the people who work in the industry have a lot to say. So I am glad that like we're being consulted, but like, oh man, here I go. I'm just talking again. But like, yeah,
No. I think you're good.
I think that we are in the perfect position for something like great to happen. I hope that the money and the funds are managed correctly and like equitably. And I hope that like it doesn't just benefit the musicians in town, because if you bring in affordable housing, for example, or any accessibility pieces that benefit the wider community at large, it also benefits the musicians. There's very little retention here. Like a lot of people will start out in Kingston, they'll move away, you know, and I'm talking like Queen students and stuff. And there's little infrastructure. So if we can support the infrastructure and, you know, maybe not give bylaw tickets to music venues for hosting live music and giving bands parking tickets for loading in at the Toucan, if we can support these things from a grassroots level, make it affordable and give people a reason to stay, everything else will kind of like, you know, happen organically, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's important for Kingstonians to acknowledge the relationship that they have with the city, and especially Kingstonians who really, really love Kingston and who want to call it a music city, because I believe Kingston is a musical city.
Yeah.
I believe Kingston is a city with a very rich music history. But if I can flip the script and be the politically opinionated one here in this conversation, I think that
Please.
If the city of Kingston wants to call itself a music city, then it should be prepared to do the kind of stuff that Jonas is asking about. Talk to the people who are working in the industry at a grassroots level. Talk to the people who need that infrastructure. Be prepared to put that infrastructure in place. Make working relationships with the BIA, with downtown Kingston, who I'm going to call out for asking for free work from designers, right?
Get fucked.
I wasn't going to say it, but hey, again, right? You know, we got an offer from like some group at Queen's, for example, saying, "Hey, we want to use your music in a documentary about Queen's football. We're all focusing on like local music, local musicians."
It's going to be nationally broadcast.
It's going to be broadcast, and then they're like, "We don't have a budget for music." And I was like, "Great, try that in Toronto, where there's people who know what sync licensing is, and they'll tell you to get in the bin."
Yeah.
We are here in a small scene that needs the infrastructure, needs the education, needs the same kind of industry build up that like a place like Toronto or Montreal has. And if this is my call to action for the city of Kingston, because I love Kingston, if Kingston wants to call itself a music city and not just a city with a lot of good musicians, the city of Kingston as a corporation, as an entity, and the following corporations that work with it should put time, effort, and money into talking to musicians in town, learning what they need, and realistically providing those opportunities to grow as musicians and in the music industry abroad.
And it's not like that. I mean, the other thing, like with like the city as well, is like stop making it actively difficult. You don't need to like give every musician in town $200,000 and say have a good life. You just need to stop making it like so difficult for musicians and quite frankly just human beings to exist in this city. It's actually really straightforward. Like, and there are just so many like little punitive things and like red tape bureaucracy things that actually prevent the city's music scene from going, and like being able to retain musicians here and having like a retention is so important, because otherwise we could just be the city that's like, oh yeah, we're a music city, the Tragically Hip and the Glorious Sons are from here. Yeah, they also fucking left, you know, like the Glorious Sons and the Tragically Hip went and played across Canada and across the US, you know, like, and that's when the city or whatever says, oh yeah, we did that. So no, like they did that. They went out, they toured, they worked their asses off, and they're bands from Kingston. Sure, it's their hometown, but like you can't just like see something being successful and be like, we see, that was us, Gold Star Music City.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something that I think I've brought up in the podcast before, and you can go back to the Tragically Hip. I remember as a kid when the Tragically Hip were up and coming, and you know, I sort of heard the name once in a while, but it wasn't until fully completely, and then they were just everywhere. And they should have been a household name before they broke everywhere else. And it happened with the Hip, it happened with the Sons, and yeah, we need to have closer ties with our own musicians in our own backyard.
Yeah.
They should be household names here before everywhere else.
For sure. And there's a ton of really simple things that can be done to just help support the local art scene. Downtown Kingston not wanting to pay for like graphic design, like come on, like it seems pretty straightforward. I think this place has so much potential, and it actually pains me how little infrastructure there is to support it. I think Kingston Live is one of the very few pieces of musical infrastructure that we have here that actually supports the music scene actively. And Mark and Moira at KPP who are amazing, and opening up the Broom Factory.
Yep.
I'm sure I'm forgetting some other people, but like these are the things that are like integral to the music community. It's not just having a ton of bands and a couple of venues for them to play. It's about having an infrastructure that can support them, from booking, management, like physical space where bands can show up to make the music and practice their art without having to worry about getting a bylaw ticket. And not
Like
just
the
bands.
studio we're working on.
Like the studio we're working on. And also not just bands either, because there's way more to Kingston's music scene than just white guys who play rock music. Saying that as a white guy who plays rock music. There's a lot of other music in this town that should be supported, and like a lot of other like genres that could be supported and, attracted to come to Kingston, make Kingston your home, or even to stop here on a tour, Oh, fuck, I'm ranting. Oh, my goodness.
I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, that was a great answer.
I'm actually on your team for this one.
Yeah. Long story short, though, I'm really glad it's happening. Like, thank God it's happening. I'm skeptical to make sure of where the money is going to end up and how it's going to be used equitably.
Yeah, we've had discussions about this, like just our group. Rob and I talk about it on occasion, and I think we're both in the same position of let's wait it out. Let's see what happens. Let's see where it goes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's long overdue, regardless.
For sure.
Yeah.
Public transport as well. Sorry.
Fuck yeah. Bus lanes, bike lanes.
Yeah. Rep up the roads.
Oh,
Yeah.
more bike lanes. All the bike lanes, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Public
Especially
transport?
in the West End.
Public transport that runs late would help. Imagine being able to go to Overtime Sports Bar to see a show and then being able to hop on the bus at 1 o'clock. I would go. Or tap on, tap off system. I don't know. Food for thought. I'm running for mayor of Kingston.
You know what's wild is so the Blue Line in Toronto, the TTC bus that runs all night. You know what got that to happen? Paul Bernardo.
Wow.
That's the only reason they started running buses overnight is because there was a serial murder rapist running around that city. I want to make it clear that's not what I'm endorsing, but I'm just saying we also need that bus, and it's sad that is the qualification that makes that happen.
Yeah, I mean, how about saving the planet, or just better quality of life for everyone? Like, for God's sake, we don't need one of the worst people of all time to inspire public transport. That is terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Let's talk about touring.
Nicole, I am sorry if you're listening.
Oh, she's gonna. We're gonna
Yes.
get notes on this. Our manager is excellent.
Let's get back to the band and the music. What's next for you guys? What's going on?
Speaking of
boy.
buses, let's talk about the tour.
We can't afford a bus.
Thank you, the radio guy, for that lovely segue. Yes.
So
Non-viable, my ass.
So much great ranting tonight. Okay. Sorry.
So, Strangers I Used to Love, the record, comes out on April 12th. And we have a handful of shows leading up to that. On April 12th, we are going to be playing a really sweet show in Kingston, and then we are driving straight to Saskatoon. I really hope we get a gig in between here and Saskatoon. We've driven straight to Saskatoon 3 tours in a row right now, and Saskatoon is so far. But we're going on the road. We're going on the road, darn it. We're going to play a bunch of shows. We're driving all the way out to the west coast of Canada, and then we're driving back through the States. This will be the first time that we've played in the United States since 2019.
It's been a while.
The before times. We're going to be playing the heck out of all the songs on the record. I'm trying to think. We got
How many
lots of
dates are there? 30-something?
something like that. We've announced 15 or so. There's going to be more. By the time you're hearing this in the future, there will probably be lots more. But yeah, we're going to play the record for as many people as we possibly can. We have some big shows in Kingston, in Cornwall, in
We love
Toronto.
When are we announcing that one?
As soon as I make the poster.
Cool.
We work hard, darn it. I swear, you gotta wear a lot of hats to be in a band these
It'll
days.
probably be announced by the time this is out.
Yeah,
okay.
by the time this is out, surely this will be announced.
Tell us about the Toronto show. Now I'm like,
We're playing
who's teasing me?
We're playing at El Macombo,
Yeah,
which is so dialed because it's such a legendary space, and I've wanted to play there since I first played there when I was 17 in a metal band, and when it was all torn up and really bad. So this will be the triumphant return to El Macombo. I'm going to invite my grandma. It's going to be awesome.
Nick, you and I spoke briefly at the Musiki merch market several weeks back, and we talked about vinyl. Is there going to be vinyl of the album?
Yep.
There's going to be vinyl of the album, which might be the thing that I'm most proud of in my entire life. We can and will have it at our album release shows. So if you want a copy, you can pick one up there. I designed the cover for this record. This is me maybe bragging a little bit, but also...
This man literally taught himself Photoshop and Lightroom, and I didn't see him away from his computer for weeks. He did all of the assets for the vinyls and the album artwork and everything by himself because we couldn't afford to pay anyone else to do it. And Nick was like, hell yeah, I'm on it.
Nice. I asked a lot of questions. I Googled a lot of stuff. My partner, Caroline, is actually a graphic designer. So when I got stuck, I was like, please help me. But yeah, I designed the cover. It's got my handwriting on it. And when I hold one in my hands, I'm going to faint because I put way too many hours into figuring out how to make the darn cover. This is going to be great.
And all of the photos for like the album artwork and the single artwork are all film photos that we have taken on tour. Like the front cover is the picture of my mum's back garden where Connie, my girlfriend, said, if I have to make small talk with strangers one more time, I'm going to lose my fucking mind. So like there's a lot of us.
It's very us. It is like every part of it is us. The visuals, the music, like all of it. And that is one of the reasons that I am like the most proud of this record because everything about it is the most honest version of us that we could possibly put out there. Mm-hmm. Also, by the time you're hearing this, I'm certain you'll be able to pre-order this record on our website.
And the website is?
thewildernessband.com. Go to the section that says shop, and if you feel so inclined, pay $1,750 for a digital download of Christina that's still up there.
We needed $1,750 to pay rent at Howe Island once. Needless to say,
nobody bought it. I put one digital download of Christina on our website for the price of our rent and wrote in the description like, "Do it, you won't." And
clearly,
to our surprise, nobody bought it.
That's insane. It's astounding to me that no one did that.
You're playing the Elmo. Send it to Michael Weckerly. Isn't he a billionaire?
Yeah, maybe next time I like get my rent bill, I'll just be like, no. Send this to Elon Musk. You must have been mistaken for somebody else.
I've heard like this is a life hack I'm going to throw out there for literally anyone. I've heard once that like if you're getting married or like have a birthday or anything coming up where like, you know, there's invites or whatever, find any list you can of billionaires' homes or at least mailing addresses because I feel like
I like where we're going with this.
Yeah.
Like torches and pitchforks kind of deal?
You would think so. But no. Then send invites there because they probably have somebody that just handles like incoming mail or incoming messages or whatever, and some like it might just slip through the cracks where they're like, whatever, just send them a check for like probably more than, you know, your Aunt Leanne is gonna send you or whatever, right? Like billionaires just have money to throw away at whatever problem.
Man, I am gonna start an enterprise.
Right? Then we go with the pitchforks.
We'll take everything we can, then pitchforks,
We just need to eat one. Then the rest will fall in line.
Yep. Taylor Swift, I'm really sorry, but rules is rules. You're a billionaire now. It brings me no joy. It really doesn't. I like you. Anyway, I feel like I'm going to get killed by a bunch of Swifties now for saying that. I'm a Swiftie myself. I don't know, but she's a billionaire now. So I don't know.
Anything else?
Come to our show.
Come to our show.
Buy our record.
Yes. Buy a record. We really hope you like the album. I am immensely proud of it. I think it is our best work by far. It is the most us thing. We got to work with some amazing people making it. It's taken us a long time. We're proud of it. Steve Foley in Ottawa, he produced and mixed this record. We owe him our lives. This album nearly killed him. I swear to God, like he put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into it, like after we were gone. Like we were recording it over the space of 6 months and he was working on it nonstop. And we are so grateful for him and to everybody who was involved in this process and to everybody who still gives a shit about our band. We're so grateful and we really hope you like the album.
I like the album. We got to hear it beforehand. I love the album. I'm looking forward to other people getting to hear the album, as I'm sure you are as well.
Absolutely. Can't friggin' wait.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in. This is great.
Thank you very much for having us again. Sorry about the ranting.
No, I'm on your team, Doug.
I'm always down for more ranting.
Yeah, I think we've done this enough that I think we kind of expected it anyway.
Thanks, guys.
This has been Kingston Live. We encourage you to rate us on your listening platform of choice and subscribe where possible. For show listings, artist info, and all things Kingston music, check out kingstonlive.ca. Kingston Live was produced in Kingston by Soundwise. Voiceovers by Riley Jabor and John Sanfilippo. Writing and research by Peter Sanfilippo. Executive producer, Rob Howard. Kingston Live is a member of the Canadian Live Music Association. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@kingstonlive.ca.